This life that I live no longer serves a purpose. What kind of parent am I being? I can't tell my daughter any differently because she's going to be the age of 10 soon, and I started living this way at the age of 10. This is not fair to me, but it's definitely not fair to her. In one split-second decision, I would change the entire course of my life in that very moment. And the life I once lived that no longer served a purpose whatsoever, and the woman that I once was, completely ceased to exist in that moment. Preston is the thief of joy. The goal not to be clean and or sober, but to love ourselves enough to live lives unaddicted, to come to that place of self-love within ourselves, where we no longer have to numb out, where we no longer have to fill the voids within ourselves. The moment I came to believe in something greater than me is the very same moment I came to believe in my very. Real transformation requires real honesty. Happiness is a byproduct of a life well lived.
You're listening to the Begin Again podcast, where real stories of addiction, recovery, and transformation take center stage. I'm Gary Menkes, and each week we bring you honest conversations with people who chose to stop surviving and start living. These are the stories that remind us healing is possible. No matter where you've been or what you've faced, it's never too late to take your power back. Thanks for being here. Let's begin again. Welcome back to the Begin Again podcast, where we share stories of resilience, redemption, and the power of choosing a new path, one day at a time. These are stories of healing, hope, and the radical transformation that recovery makes possible. Joining us tonight to share her story with us, I can't wait for you all to hear this. She's a health and lifestyle coach. She is the founder of Sober Active Canada. She is a warrior for recovery. She recovers out loud. She is Alexandra Talbot. Alexandra, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on, first and foremost, and for sharing your platform with me to carry the message and share my experience, strength, and hope with your viewers.
Right back at you. Thank you. Thank you for recovering out loud. Thank you for all you do for this community. And we were just talking offline. You're doing a lot more than I was even aware of, which I can't wait for you to share with our audience. But let's go back a little bit before we got to this amazing place that you are. How was it life beforehand?
Like I always say, right? And if I go back to it in retrospect, and I won't get into a drug-a-log or a drink-a-log or a trauma-log or anything, right? If I look back in retrospect, I always say I started using and boozing at the young age of 10. Where along that fine line it went from recreational use. And trust me, I think I was having the time of my life back then. It was reserved for the weekends. It was partying. I had a great those first few years of my teenage years, they were popping like that. It was definitely a party, but where along that fine line, it went to daily habitual abuse, an Alex party of one. I don't know. It was quick. It was insidious. It was dirty. It was ugly. And when I look at it, obviously the drugs and alcohol never being the problem. Actually, give me anything and I'll take it there, right? And I do speak out a lot about my other addictions, codependency, love, emotional, sex, porn, you name it. Not a lot of women talk about their porn addiction, but I do. I'm public about everything. If I have an ease that centers in my mind, right? The greatest battle I'll ever fight is the one between my two ears, right? Yeah. Give me anything if I'm not of clear and sound mind, if I'm not mentally healthy. And to me, addiction, I might not be clinically diagnosed with any mental health disorder or depression, anxiety, you name it. Addiction is a mental health issue in and of itself, right? So if I'm not right up here, give me anything. It could be today all natural peanut butter, and I will take it there, you know? Yep. 2 tablespoons is, 1 tablespoon too many, a few thousand, never enough for Alex. Like, I will take it there if I'm not right up here. And there have been those moments in my 8 years on my recovery journey, where I've gone into very deep depressive states. But I have the tools and I have the approaches and the modalities today to be able to identify those toxic behavioral patterns and those addictive behaviors before they morph into the intolerable, inexcusable, unacceptable, and deplorable actions and reactions that they used to in the past. And that's where I go into it. I was an alcoholic and an addict long before I was admittedly so. It took me 28 years. I came into recovery at the age of 38, started using and boozing at the young age of 10. But if I go back to the beginning of time and I start looking at my belief systems, my behavioral patterns, my thoughts, the way I think, that my act, all that made me up to who I am and all the fragmented parts within me. Like that, I was an addict and an alcoholic long before I was definitely, admittedly so, an alcoholic and an addict,
Sure.
right? It took me 28 years to admit that to myself. Greatest revelation of all time, though, by the way, people. Like, greatest revelation of all time. But, I go back, way back. But again, everything begins and ends up here, right? So when I really look at my journey and my trajectory leading up to, April 22nd, 2017, and I can't tell you why that day out of all days, that was the day, because there's kind of be a more random date on the calendar, right? April
Mm,
22nd, 2017.
yeah.
But unbeknownst to me, in one split second decision, and that was one split second decision, unbeknownst to me, I would change the entire course of my life in that very moment. And the life I once lived that no longer served a purpose whatsoever, and the woman that I once was completely ceased to exist in that moment. So I'll never call it my dry date. I'll never call it my clean date. I'll never call it my sober date. It is absolutely my rebirth date. I don't even look like the same woman physically that I did on April 22nd, 2017. And when I look at that woman that I was at 250 pounds, I can tell you that was a culmination of 28 years of substance abuse, a complete lack of self-respect. Therefore, she didn't demand it or command it in return, nor did she give it in turn. A complete disregard for her health and her wellness and her safety and security and that of her daughters, because I am a single mother, and stripped of any dignity I may have ever had. And in our recovery circles, we say that we find ourselves in recovery. Having started to use and booze at the young age of 10, I say, how can you find something you never lost? We
Mm,
can't find something we didn't lose. I never knew who I was outside of that. It had become so normalized. It had become my very lifestyle. Drugging, drinking, working, that's what I knew how to do. It had become my very identity in the end. I pride and glorified myself on that. That's what I was in competition with people about. I could outsnort you, outdrink you, outfuck you, outparty you. You could stay up for 6 days, watch me go, I'll stay up for 7.
yeah.
That's the shit I prided myself on.
I did the same thing. There was a competition element to it with me as well. Oh, you were better than me at some things. All right, but not in this arena.
Right?
You think you're good? Like, let's go. Oh, what
Yeah.
happened? You passed out? All right. Next. And it's just, even with some of my best buddies, and actually some of them are in recovery. We've had some of these, ridiculous that only sick people do. Right. But I think
Comparison is the thief of joy.
what, say that again? I missed it. What'd you say?
Comparison is the thief
Oh
of
my,
joy.
oh, but to have that competitive, right? And the competition's getting worse and darker and darker and darker.
Yeah.
One thing that goes,
Yeah.
oh, let's do shots together versus like, all right, let's go deep and we're at this for, 2, 3 days or whatever it may be in
Yeah.
different country, whatever it may be, right? It's just, it gets,
So even for me today, like I look at it, right, and I've been able to take that competitive nature and instill that inner strength and determination, find that inner strength and
yeah,
determination within me to win in all aspects of my life, right? Surrender to win, we say in the rooms.
yeah,
I think too, now I look at it and I've been able to convert that into something positive. I am a national level decorated competitive bodybuilder. I don't know if you can see my shit behind me right now.
you missed it.
I'm a figure pro in an association up here in Canada. But when I start to look at it, like when I say it had become so normalized and regularized, it had become my lifestyle.
Yeah.
Drugging and drinking was my lifestyle. It was my routine, and how sad of an existence that is. I was mentioning it in another interview a couple weeks ago. Like I remember starting on my recovery journey and being on Instagram, and there was He Totally Fit, I think it is, and I think she's still out there. But she had put on a 30-day self-love challenge, right? And for me, I look at recovery as a transformative process, not what program you're working on, what program you're not. I could care less. Like whatever you're working, if it's working for you, keep working it. It's absolutely a transformative process, right? The goal not to be clean and or sober, but to love ourselves enough to live lives unaddicted, to come to that place of self-love within ourselves, where we no longer have to numb out, where we no longer have to fill the voids within ourselves, where we no longer have to express underexpressed areas of ourselves by reaching out or those traumas or, the inner turmoil and chaos and the traumas and the underlying deep rooted issues. Again, the drugs and alcohol never being the problem. Let's get that straight. But to be able to identify those things within me without having to solve them by the drugs and alcohol, had just become asymptomatic to my dis-ease. And I'll always put a hyphen mark in dis-ease. I have a dis-ease of self. I'm not comfortable in, of, within, and by myself, right? And to not have to use those toxic coping mechanisms or behaviors anymore. I think you're in a traditional program as well, and if I start looking at things there and like words like character defects, I'm not a defective person, so I never use the word character defects. I use character defenses. Why am I putting up these character traits? To what within me am I trying to protect? Right? Because it's clearly something within me that I'm trying to protect or hold on to.
Yeah.
So I start looking really today at why am I putting up these character defects? Because they will come back, right? In a step 6, it just says I have to entirely be ready to have God remove all these defects of character from me. It doesn't say God removes them entirely from me,
No.
right? But to be able to take a step back today, to be able to identify those again and be able to step into action, right? When I say I have a dis-ease that centers in my mind, like even if, and then this will be the last bit of program talk I talk or traditional talk I talk, I am a notorious and very hardcore 12-stepper and I'm in various fellowships. But when I go back to the doctor's opinion in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, obviously the original transcript of any 12-step program, right? If you go back to the original manuscript, in the doctor's opinion, a psychic change is required to emotionally cope with life on life's terms. Again, I come back to my disease centers in my mind.
Yes.
Once I conquer this, I could conquer anything. Because even my blind faith and even my belief, and that's the most radical. So now I've already said most revolutionary change on most greatest revelation of all time on April 22nd, 2017 was making that admonition to self, right? And finally calling myself out for exactly what I was and being released from the bondages of my own uniqueness in that very moment, right? Because I was no different than anybody else. I was just a junkie and an alcoholic like the rest of them. And that's exactly what I had to call myself out for to go get the help I so desperately needed, right? But greatest, most radical, revolutionary change in that moment was kicking it into faith-based thinking. There was definitely a presence greater than me in my room that day because that was not Alex Talbot doing for herself what she clearly couldn't do for herself over 28 years, Everything that day was an outer body experience to me, and I still vividly remember it. From picking up the phone, from getting the help, from walking out the doors of my house, from walking into the doors of the rooms of recovery to, that was not me. That was higher power shit. But when I start looking at God in the spiritual sense, right? And insert of your own understanding, conception, design, and experience here, whatever that may look like to you, in whichever way, shape, or form, there is definitely something greater than me that exists out there for me to even be here today. But when I start looking at God in the spiritual sense, which let's break that myth right now, right? Like the 12-step recovery is not a religious program, it's a spiritual program.
Thank you for saying that. Yes.
I don't worship God. God is not outside of me. God is within me in a spiritual sense. So when I come into now in that moment as well, a step 2, and I stepped 1, 2, and 3'd myself unconsciously to me before even walking, because it took me 2 weeks to know what the 12 steps were. I didn't even know what 12-step recovery was at that time, right? But unconsciously to me in my room that day, and I'll go down to my grave saying that, I stepped 1, 2, and 3'd myself in that room that day. Because also in that very moment, so now I've said, greatest revelation of all time, admonition to self, most radical, revolutionary change, kicking it into faith-based thinking and coming to believe that there was something greater than me in my room that day with me. But the moment I came to believe in something greater than me is the very same moment I came to believe in my very self.
Alex, I need to ask, what in your mind, what happened? How did you wake up? Did you wake up on 4/22/17? Please take me. What happened?
I was actually, and no, I didn't get down on my knees and surrender. That I did not do that. I didn't get down on my knees. I don't get down on my knees. I have to pray. I sit and meditate and pray like in cross-legged on it. Actually, it's funny you should say that because I was still rushing like a bit. I was trying to go to sleep when I got fucking woke.
Yeah.
And I won't say it was a spiritual awakening because, we've had to have worked all the steps As a result of all of these steps, we've had a spiritual awakening and carry the message, but that was definitely my vital spiritual experience. Okay. And, so then I came to believe in something greater than me was the moment I came to believe in my very self for the first time in 28 years. And in that moment, that's when I turned it over. That's when I completely flipped the script. Something just flipped in my head. And then for those of you that aren't familiar with the steps, step 3 is to turn our will. So my thoughts, in that moment, I turned my will, my thoughts, and my life, my actions over to the care and protection of a power greater than myself. And there was no looking back from that moment forward.
This all happened to you on 4/22/17, but is there seeds planted before, or did
Yes, there were seeds planted before,
good.
and we only need that mustard seed of faith. And it's so funny because before that point, when I got to so those last 2 years, man, and I mean, 28 years, full throes of active addiction and acute alcoholism, right? Being a single mother, my daughter living her first 10 years of her life in that bullshit, in that lifestyle, not having been born. That was one of the things that went through my head that morning too. She was just going to be turning 10 in that August. And I was like, Alex, who are you? Who are you to tell her anything differently when you started living this lifestyle at that age? You got to start being the woman you're fucking raising, start walking the walk and talking the talk and stepping up to the plate and actually being a parent. You're her sole provider. You're killing yourself because the week before, April 22nd, 2017, in a final act of desperation, before I was given the gift of desperation, I had gone across town. So when your dealers are no longer coming to your house or telling you to get off the streets because they have cause for concern for you, your dealers have cause for concern for you, and you've been their payroll for years, you got a problem, girl. But I went and picked up off of somebody I did not know, I'd never met. And I could tell you what, for putting that shit up my nose for the latter part of 28 years every day, I did not put cocaine up my nose that day. And I thought the only way to get down from that high was to take my own life. However, again, there's always been a higher power with me to even be here to live to tell the tale today. And that still wasn't enough because I still had to go another week. So there were a whole bunch of lead up moments to that. When people say rock bottom, apparently there's levels to your fucking rock bottom. There's a bottom underneath the bottom,
Yep.
just like there's, when I start identifying causes and conditions, that's what I say. There's always causes and conditions under those causes and conditions. The whys underneath the whys underneath the whys, right? Let's peel the layers, people.
Yeah.
We're such complex people. And addiction was never rational, right? So recovery is definitely not linear, and there's levels to this shit. But yeah, I had so many wake up calls leading up to that point. One of them being, I was a high ranking federal public service employee for a very long time with the government of Canada, and everything catches up to you, people. And we'll start going into more of what it's been like today and how this kind of led to everything too. For years, up until that point, I was about 18 years of pensionable service and high-ranking public service employee making a lot of money at a very young age. Take the show. That December 2016, and I was starting already at work and stuff. Even the summer before, I had lied. I was forging doctor's notes. I had said I got in a car accident because for the first time in however many years, I actually sat there in my car shaking before going into the building and saying, I can't fucking go in today. And how many times I've gone in fucking tweaking out, freaking drunk and smelling like shit anyways. But for some reason that day I couldn't go in. So instead I called and I said I had gotten in a car accident that morning and I didn't show up to work for 2 months and partied for 2 months straight, right? And that was kind of the progression to the lead up of, but it would still take me 2 years to get to that point. So even that December 2016, having always have made, I looked so great on paper, people. That's the other thing too, right? The seas of perception that we have. That's what kept me in my denial for so long. And another thing too, Alex was up here, right? Everyone was below her and everything was beneath her. I was up here and I was money hungry, power, less money of less problems of money, property, power, and prestige. You know, that was Alex. That was all my problems. Is that shit just going in my head, right? When I got into the federal public service at the age of 20, and I had fast-tracked high school, I got into university at the age, so I was always academically successful, professionally successful. By day, Alex, professional Alex, by night, running the fucking streets. Like living a dual life until that dual life became one. And that was also quick, fast, insidious, dirty, ugly, just like my disease was, right? There was a progression to that too. And yeah, and like I was feeling I had nothing to show for this. And apparently when you're 7 months in arrears on your mortgage, the bank kind of wants their money back. Like I got served that December, I got served with the notice of foreclosure on my condo. And I'm a single mother.
Yeah.
And I'm working for a deputy head, which is a commissioner of a U.S. federal department on your side, like the highest ranking bureaucrat. How am I going to explain this one, folks? Senior advisor living out of her Mitsubishi Mirage. I don't know if you've seen a Mitsubishi Mirage. My daughter's as tall as me, okay? How am I going to explain this one to people that were living out of my car? So in that moment, when the bailiff left my house because I was fucking high, that was it for me. I stopped in that moment, right? The intent was there. What are you doing with your life? Finally asking myself these questions.
Right.
What are you doing with your life? You're in near homelessness. Oh my God, how the hell am I going to explain this one? Like now things are starting to crumble and I'm starting to feel it.
Yeah. Yes.
So I stopped in that moment and we had reached out to, funny enough, a girl that I had been I had met just that year and we had been using together. I heard that, she had committed herself, like she kind of had a psychosis, committed herself, went to rehab, detox, and was doing great. She was like a few months into her program and stuff. I didn't even know what the program was. And I reached out to her. And, she started talking to me, kind of like, talking her program lingo and shit. And the intent was there. But listen, like, I didn't even know what turning shit over was, the will, a higher power, all that stuff. I didn't know that, right? But, oh my God, like, I need to figure out my life and sort it out here, So 28 days go by and I stay, I guess you can call that. But I still really wasn't trying to recover or anything, I was just, and we're resourceful, us addicts are resourceful people. I found the money to pay back my mortgage that was in arrears and get my condo back. And there was no question of me living in the car. And I was off to the races again. But it's funny because on that New Year's Eve, and I use this as an analogy because it's a pretty funny one. That New Year's Eve, the fellowship that she was in, she had invited me to their masquerade ball. And I got high that day, obviously. It's fucking New Year's Eve. Like, whatever. I've just paid off my mortgage that was in arrears. I'm living life again, right?
Right.
I'm off to the races.
Fact.
But I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to this thing with her tonight. But if I don't use for 2 hours before going to pick her up, nobody will know. I'll be clean. I'll have been clean for 2 hours. So I'll be fine there. And it's funny because I'm the only one because I'm too cool for school, right? There's no way I'm wearing a mask and who dances fucking sober? Like what I'm saying? Like, okay, I'll go to this shit and just check it out because like it's her, she's my good friend, whatever. But I go there and I'm the only one wearing a mask, but not wearing a mask still, right? And then I could not wait long enough for that 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4 to pop off and boot out of there, right?
Yeah.
And then I went on another, and I don't call it a spree. It was a 6-month rampage, and then lead up to the week before, getting in another very toxic, codependent relationship. So many things led up to that point. Those were probably some bigger of the events, But it was just my time when it was my time, April 22nd, 2017. And I don't think had I tried given this a go, I would have never given it an honest go before that day.
Right.
And in that moment, like things, like I was like, I'm utterly defeated. Like I can't live like this anymore. Can I even call this a life? This life that I live no longer serves a purpose. What kind of parent am I being? I can't tell my daughter any differently because she's going to be the age of 10 soon. And I started living this way at the age of 10. This is not fair to me, but it's definitely not fair to her. She never asked to be born into this lifestyle, into this world. This is what I bring her into. She's been living this way for 10 fucking years. Her house is supposed to be a safe haven. Instead, she can hardly sleep because she's watching everybody else's kids anyways that are over. It's a revolving door. I don't even know who I'm letting into my house anymore. holes punched in the wall, safety. I'm not being a parent whatsoever, but I always looked good on paper. So that really kept me in my denial for a very long time. And, apparently everything catches up to you. And luckily enough, I was 3 weeks into the rooms, 3 weeks into my recovery when this happened. And this is really where I then shifted gears and recovery became a transformative process and it became my lifestyle. People will always say, Alex, you're so intense. And I
Yeah.
just say, I'm just chasing my recovery like I used to chase that next high and that next high fix and drunk, man. And that was by any means and any lengths necessary. So that's
That's
just what I'm doing. I taste my recovery today, and recovery is absolutely my lifestyle. I live, breathe, sleep, eat this shit,
yeah, you do.
right? I wear it loud and proud too,
You do.
It is my life hyphen style. It's my life and it's my style. Like it's everything that I am today. And when so I was 3 weeks into the rooms, right?
All right.
And two things happened to me in that 3 week time span. I already thought I was doing great. You get on that pink cloud, 3 weeks in, the gash is like healing up underneath my nose. I'm starting to be clean again. I'm starting to show up to work, show up for myself, show up for my employees. I'm being reactive, proactive, alert, on the ball again. I'm performing again.
Yeah.
Holy shit, I'm 3 weeks into this shit. I'm better.
Yeah.
But so I get summoned into the big boss's office, like the deputy head's office, and that I work for, and it's not every day you do. And I even made that joke as I was going in, and I thought he was calling me in to look at my future staffing action plans. I had my org charts with me. Let's go, Alex is back.
Mm.
And within 15 minutes, I was being escorted out of the building. I was terminated without cause. And you normally lose a job as a federal public service employee, highly
Yeah.
unionized, except I was in a unionized position. I was a manager and no workforce adjustment for Alex. It was literally, I was being escorted out of the building within 15 minutes because like I said, everything catches up to you. And apparently you don't steal from the public coffer or use taxpayer funds to fund your habit. I remember I was saying this ease of perception, and I wasn't like the rest of you. I wasn't a criminal, except I was committing white collar crime. I was defrauding the government. I was using your taxpayer funds to fund my habits. I was using my government travel card to travel to the bank machine to get cash advances because I definitely couldn't afford it. I had no money in my bank account, and I couldn't pay my credit card back at work. That's how I'm getting caught now. I had been doing that for years, but at least I could pay it back and make it go unknown and unseen, right? But now, so that caught up to me. But I was 3 weeks into my recovery, luckily enough, because as I was being escorted out of that building, I could have ran with that severance package, and trust me, I could have definitely got loaded. And that was the thought that crossed my mind. Or this is a blessing in disguise, and now your full-time job is going to become working on yourself. And when I go into that, I have a 3-pronged dis-ease, the mental obsession, physical compulsion, and spiritual malady. I could not move away from the fact that I'm going to attack those 3 on a daily basis. And all the 12 steps gives me is my spiritual program of action. So you best believe I better have a mental program of action and a physical program of action too. And there goes my trifecta program, my win-win-win program, I like to call it. Nutrition and fitness have proven viable approaches to my recovery, complemented by my 12-step programs. I have to work those 3 in synergy. Now, when I came into the rooms again, 250-pound woman, and the thing I did, not shit that had crossed my mind at the time, but I did lose my job, right? 18 years of pensionable service. For the first time in 18 years, Alex has no job, right? And she's always had a good freaking job in the federal public, right? But now it's going to be my full-time job to work on myself day in and day out, mind, body, and soul, right? And I had read also early on at that 3.3-week juncture. That was a very critical 3 weeks for me. I read John C. Maxwell's quote, and that will be like my words to live by till the day I die. Change something you do daily, change your life. Your success lies in your daily routine, right?
Yeah.
You guys think up until that point, my daily routine was drugging, drinking, working, right? Drugging, drinking, working, day in, day out. That was my daily routine. I completely overhauled that shit. I stepped into the spiritual and mental exercise in the morning, my recovery devotional. Step into and now I couldn't even do 2 minutes of cardio back then, but I started doing slowly but surely started, I started with some yoga. And that's still very much my foundational practice today, but how much that taught me how to make that connection between breath, mind, body, and soul and the synergies. And then that's when I brought my recovery, in the rooms of recovery, we'll say that the 12-step program is recovery, but it's not. It's absolutely a transformative process, right? So I start looking at things like, making that mind, body, soul connection, brain fit, body fit, spirit fit. You can't have one without the other. So again, if you're telling me I have a three-pronged dis-ease, I have a mental obsession, a physical compulsion, and a spiritual malady, I have to attack those three elements on the daily. So I have to step in to practices. And I've been focusing on the last couple of months on FM Alexander's quote, right? We don't decide our futures. We decide our habit, and our habits decide our futures. And then as I started this transformation journey and changing all my habits, right? And I have to as I rid myself of all toxicity in my life, not only the people, places, and things that were once in my life, right? But the substances, the thoughts, the negative thought patterns, the negative self-talk, right down to the food I consume. It was about ridding myself of all toxicity. Of course, I was living a waste case life. Everything I was consuming, from the people I was surrounding myself with, to what I was watching, reading, listening to. I can't even listen to gangster rap today. It freaking makes me feel aggressive and I don't feel good inside. Like everything you consume. Diet is so much more than what we eat.
Hey, everyone, quick break to tell you about Recover. That's RCVR. If you're on this journey of recovery, you already know it's not just about quitting. It's about rebuilding. It's about self-discovery and reclaiming your best life. That's exactly why I created Recover, a lifestyle brand built for us, by us, those who have walked through the fire and come out stronger. Head over to recoverbrand.com. That's RCVRbrand.com to grab your Recover gear. We wear it as a daily reminder that you're not alone and that your story is just beginning. And because you're part of this community, use Recover20 for 20% off your first order. And wear your story, share the message, and end the stigma. Now back to the show.
It's everything we're absorbing and consuming and feeding our bodies, feeding our minds and our bodies and our souls, right? So of course I was living a waste case life before. Then everything I was putting in my body was junk, was toxic. How I do one thing is how I do everything today. So I will definitely say, those 12 spiritual principles now that I practice in all my affairs and apply across all facets of my life. And let's go one step further now that I'm in yoga of 12-step recovery, that I embody. Those are the foundational building blocks for everything I do today. So even when people will ask me, is bodybuilding integral to your recovery? It's intrinsic. It is one and the same. I look at it from a standpoint of when I'm training, honesty, courage, hope, faith, right? Compassion for myself, self-love, discipline, integrity, because I'm on 100% natty, by the way. But, like I was saying, there's levels to this shit. I had still been living a lie for 36 years. Happy to report I'm 3 months sober as fuck. And of course, I'm a nicotine anonymous now too. But I had still been living that lie, and it really made me question recently. And it was in April, right before I was hitting my 8 years. I really started questioning, have I really been clean and sober of all mood and mind altering substances for the last 8 years? I almost didn't celebrate my 8 years. I almost rewound my time. But there's levels to this shit, and I'm taking it as that next level spiritual experience, spiritual awakening that I needed to keep delving deeper. Recovery, again, being a transformative process, uncovering, discovering, and recovering myself on a daily basis. My work is never done, right? The more layers I unpeel, the more I find out about myself. But that's the beauty in it, right? The betterment, the self-discovery journey, the healing journey, right? But that's daily, that's ongoing, that's God willing, lifelong for me, right? I'm in this ship for the long haul. So, I'm taking it as that next phase in my recovery at 8 years in to actually delve deeper, right? And I want to go to this because, again, with my bodybuilding, right? So I came out of retirement as well in my athletic career recently, and I'm competing. And it's my journey for me here is to do that inner work, go deeper, right? Because even with this next level in my recovery, it's to gain a deeper understanding of the knowledge of his will for me and the power to carry that out. So I got to go inside of me again and go more go more profound than I ever have to grow pro again. And those are the concepts I embody, I manifest, I envision for myself. Because again, to me today, the outcomes, the timelines, it's funny because that's what I do as a profession in my professional career, as a strategic advisor, timelines, all that shit, forward planning, all that. Like I'm so detail oriented, right? Like,
Yeah.
but I got to let that shit go. That's all predetermined. My higher power decides that for me today. So between me and getting on that stage, I just need to keep doing the next right thing bound to happen, right? So again, those 12 spiritual principles, I don't only practice them in all my affairs, but across all facets of my life, in everything I do and in every relationship I have, right? So yeah, they are the foundational building blocks for everything I do. I'm just going to look at the time. So that
Awesome.
led me to back then, that really led me to, I'm out of a job, but I'm starting to recognize these huge transformational changes in me, right? Real transformation requires real honesty. And
Yeah.
again, when I start looking at recovery as a transformative process, first of all, if you look at the word recovery in the dictionary, it's by very definition, it's to return to health and wellness after suffering illness or injury. Okay. So that's the exact definition of the word. Okay. When now I start looking at it as a transformative process, abstinence is but one component. And even in the big book, it'll tell you, right? But that's just the beginning. You put down the drink, that's just the beginning, Alex.
Mhm.
More work and more work and more work is to be done, right? You guys step into action too, right? Without action, it's all mother talk, right? And I don't like flapping lips anymore. But so I start looking at this transformational process as abstinence being but one component. It's really about improving my health and my wellness, thereby improving my quality of life.
Mm.
And I start looking at the psychology behind nutrition and fitness or physical activity. It doesn't have to be bodybuilding. It doesn't have to be exercise that's so results driven. It bears a negative connotation, except, intense Alex loves that shit. So I love the word exercise and I love the word training, and I'm a competitive bodybuilder. And it bodes very well for my addict brain, by the way. So yes, we can definitely conclude that. So yeah, so I look into, okay, maybe I have something to bring to this world. Maybe my calling is to help as much as I'm addicted to myself, to bettering myself, I'm addicted to helping others better themselves, right?
Oh,
And when I want to be of maximum service, but when I start looking at my own mind, body, soul transformation, how do I bring that to my fellows, to my peers, to my community? So I go get my health and lifestyle coaching certification, and I only work with other recovering addicts and alcoholics to help them reach their optimal health and wellness goals, right? Again, recovery being a transformative process about not only abstinence, but improving our quality, improving our health and our wellness, thereby improving our quality of lives, right? Happiness is a byproduct of a life well lived. And again, that 12-step program and my 12 steps, and my programs and fellowship is but giving me a spiritual program of action. So let's help others get their mental program of action, get integrative, right? Integrated
yeah.
all together. Right. So that led me into a completely different career path. But I did end up getting my job back in the federal public service. And funny enough, I was telling you before we jumped on, I just recently moved across Canada, but I retired from the public service of Canada with
Yeah.
25 years of pensionable service, took early retirement to start this next chapter in my life and focus on my life goals and my priorities. And it's funny, I say, I was a federal public service employee for 25 years, but I'm finally being of service to my publics today. But I was able to take early retirement from the federal public service of Canada in November 2024. And it's funny because in May 2017, I was being handed my ass to me on a pink slip,
Mhm.
where I was just able to leave with my head held high and probably the most trustworthy public service employee you could have ever had. Those promises, they do materialize, granted we work for them. Actually, it says they will always materialize if we work for them. Not maybe, not possibly, not perhaps, not likely. They will always materialize. And I could tell you, they have materialized in so many ways in my life. And I could see them materializing in other people's lives, you know, whether it be the women I work with in the traditional rooms or the traditional settings through the literature, whether it be my clients that I work with on the health coaching side. And now I'm trying to, my biggest life goal, my biggest dream in all of this, I'm bringing my vision to life when I'm trying to establish Canada's first ever multi-purpose holistic recovery-based holistic health wellness meeting and event center here in Calgary. Calgary being the recovery capital of Canada, but that's just my first one. You know, on paper, I do have them in every major city in Canada, and then maybe start going across the world if the model works, if it's, but I think the demand is there, you know. There's such an importance again, and like we were saying, I was saying at the beginning, right? Brain fit, body fit, spirit fit. You cannot have one without the other. If we start looking at our dis-ease of addiction, the mental, physical, and spiritual component, right? I'm fucking soul sick. I have a spiritual malady, you know? I definitely have a physical compulsion, and that physical manifestation, or that allergy, we like to call it in the traditional sense, you know? I'm not normal, and an allergy is an abnormal reaction to a substance or a thing. I definitely have that. And then I go into the mental obsession, because that's the one that's the most important, because that's the one that triggers the rest of them. If you don't have this under control, everything beginning and ending in the mind again, right? When I even go back to that step one big book today, and this, so, you know, like the 12 steps are so broadly applicable. And so there's a universality about them. You don't even have to be in a, in 12 step program to like practice these principles. And in fact, if I start looking at other people, because today in my life, I only surround myself with winners, right? Unless you're not part of my family, everybody that's in my life today is in some shape, way, or form in some type of recovery or some type of betterment journey, right?
Yes.
Self-improvement journey. And when I start talking to some of my friends who are hell-bent not to label themselves, and to each their own, live and let live, people. Call yourself whatever the hell you want to call yourself. I don't care. But you know, the ones that are like so held, there's no way I'm not an alcoholic, but I have substance use disorder, da da da. And then they're talking to me, and they have nonprofit organizations, and they're doing all these wonderful things, and we're having conversations, and like, I'm like, you've just basically told me that you 12-stepped yourself without 12-stepping yourself. You know, those principles, there's a universality about them. When we're looking at recovery, we are looking at mind, body, and soul work, right? We are looking at the mental, physical, spiritual, and that might, in any pathway that you're on, because it's a holistic approach to our holistic being, our whole being, our overall wellness, mind, body, and soul, right? What makes us up as, you know? Yeah. So I always find that cool. And, sorry, I'm just looking at the time again. So we have a few more minutes. What would you like to talk about? So I'm really trying to, and the importance of it, right? And the importance of physical activity is such a, first of all, like in early recovery, you know, or anybody that's early along in their sobriety journeys, or whatever you want to call the journey. And it's funny because people will often ask me why my handle is Healthy XXL. It's actually also the name of my health coaching practice. But a Healthy XXL stands for Healthy Living Life Large, because that's what my broader journey is, one towards healthy living life large. That journey encompasses the rest of them, whether it be my spiritual growth journey, whether it be my, what was once a weight loss journey to today a fitness and athletic journey, my single motherhood journey, my recovery journey, my transformation journey, my healing journey, my self-improvement journey. Everything is under that, right? I always say, you know, Sober Active Canada, you know, our primary principle there, healthy self, heal thyself. It's composed of the exact same word, right?
Powerful.
And if we start looking again, right, and building that community, and the opposite of addiction is absolutely connection. And whether that be connection to higher self and power, because again, if God is within me in spirituality, then higher self is higher power. And then my higher state of consciousness becomes my God consciousness today, right? And that faith-based thinking, again, in my mind, right? And then connection to community and family and connection to nature, right? And once you have those three connections, like that's some powerful shit, right? So the opposite of addiction is absolutely connection. And when you start building that community, right? And like I'm totally recognizant of that. So these are all things of my ways of giving back, and giving it to keep it, and bringing, that promoting physical activity, and have like physical activity that goes such a long way, right? First of all, this is probably, you're going to need all your strength. This is a battle, right? And your energy back, and getting that self-esteem back and that self-confidence back in our recovery, and then gaining that strength again. But it's also a known natural relapse prevention tool. And actually, it's more effective than most antidepressants on the market, right? Like physical activity is so important, but so is nutrition as well, right? That's equally important on my mental health as on my physical health. So, I really go into without the power of we, there would absolutely be no me. But, you replace the I in illness with a we and you get wellness, right? So that's where I really want to go with Sober Active Canada, both on that side of things, but also with the sector. And it's gonna,
Yeah.
I still don't have its exact name, but right now we'll just dub it Sober Active 8, right? And really bringing those components, right? Because it's about bettering ourselves on every level, right? Again, brain fit, body fit, spirit fit. We can't have one without the other. And for me, when I come back to it, remember, and I was saying at the beginning, the goal not to be clean and or sober, but to love ourselves enough to live lives unaddicted.
Yeah.
Okay. So I usually always end most of my podcast interviews, especially when I've really talked on the fitness aspect of things, self-care is self-love, right? Self-love is self-respect, and self-respect is self-discipline. And once you have those four under your belt, there lie true higher self and power.
That's incredible. I mean, everything you just said, absolutely. I've been floored here. Usually I interject, but I'm kind of floored. It's incredible. Before you go, I know we have a hard stop coming. Then we'll find out where to find you, but just to give our audience one little tip, I think here. And when you get, by the way, P.S., when you get your thing going up and running, we're going to have you back on because there's a lot I want to ask, and I can't wait to see where this
Okay.
It's incredible. What is one part you talk about those four last, love yourself? What's some tips? I think that's some of the hardest things. Even people I know, and as you know, I've been sober 19 years. I've been recovering 19 years. Some of them, friends of mine in long-term recovery, even longer than me, they still talk to themselves. They still beat the shit out of themselves. They still think somewhere deep down that they're a piece of shit. You seem to get so clear on like steroids so quick, and you're speeding to this beautiful place, and you're helping people along the way. What is a tip to help us, to help me, help our friends, help the audience practice, at least mentally, spiritually, that self-love that they so desperately need?
Okay, well, I think, I always tell people just the simple fact that we're sitting down and having this conversation and you're asking these questions and you're on a recovery journey, or at least even thinking of perhaps, because we're not all as far along as the other, or even if you're just simply thinking about it.
Correct.
And you're telling me that you can't love yourself, or you don't love yourself enough, or you'll never come to that place of self-love. I think I didn't even say that in that part. But again, on April 22nd, 2017, embarking on my recovery journey that day, greatest act of self-love of all time. Right? So just the fact that we're sitting here, you might not think, you're taking for granted your self-love game.
Yeah.
Okay? You're already in self-love in that moment, But yes, our self-love game definitely got to be stronger than our desire to be loved out here, right? If we don't love ourselves first, we can't really love anybody else, right? And if we can't stay true to ourselves, who the fuck are we really staying true to, right? I think a lot of people have a hard, like, for me, when I start looking at self-care, like in my health coaching practice and helping people incorporate, the sound and positive and non-toxic self-care practices in their lives, Yes, some days it can definitely be just chocolate and bubble bath and like that self-care. Yes, okay. Relaxation mode, whatever. But I start looking really at the 6 elements of self-care: physical self-care, emotional self-care, mental self-care, social self-care, this kind of stuff, talking to another fellow, talking to another human being. That's social self-care. Spiritual self-care and practical self-care. People don't often think about budgeting or things like that, regular tasks. That's the practical self-care. That's going to improve your tomorrows, right? Or again, the clutter around you can clutter your mind, right? Like, so, just cleaning, the practical self-care, like people don't look at that. So I start really looking at exercises and tools that people can employ in those 6 different areas, right? And I'll probably I'll leave you with this one. And this is probably the easiest way to start really employing some self-care practices in your life, and very, very easy. I use the acronym NOURISH, and to nourish ourselves daily beyond food. And if you can hit on these all at the same time, then you're really nourishing yourself on a daily basis. Nourish yourself beyond food. So N, notice nature. O, observe your breath. U, unite with others.
Yes.
Hopefully I don't spell this wrong. R, replenish with food. I, initiate movement. S, sit in silence. And H, harness your creativity.
Unbelievable. That's so powerful. Before you go, where can we go find you? Where can we follow you and see what's coming up next in your future?
So social media addiction is a real thing. I limit myself to Instagram only. On Instagram, I do have my personal page, my personal handle. You can follow my bodybuilding journey, my health coaching, all that kind of stuff, all my personal stuff over at Alexi Talbot, ALEXYTALBOT _ healthy XXL. And then right now, Sober Active Canada. That's probably the easiest handle to remember. That's my national nonprofit recovery-based community for those addicted to bettering themselves, fostering health, hope, and healing nationwide from coast to coast. Recovery Without Borders. We are international now. There I have virtual and locally based events as well. Check it out. We're going to start having some Y12SR sessions shortly through Sober Active Canada, and some other good things coming up there, recovery hikes, you name it, now that I'm in the Canadian Rockies. And we're also, and I also feature what I like to call, so through my programming and my recovery MVP features, where I showcase amazing Canadians doing amazing work in the mental health and addiction space up here in Canada, the recovery sector, doing some amazing, amazing, amazing things. Providing a platform for them to share their experience, strength, and hope, because lived experience is our teacher.
Unbelievable. Those will all be in the show notes. Go give Alex a follow. Alex, I can't thank you enough for being here with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a true pleasure, freaking honored and privileged that I finally got to chop it up with you.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do this again.
Yeah, we will for sure. We will for sure. And like I told you, Recovery Month, I usually get an international MVP on, and I know you're doing great things too out there. So not only with the podcast, but your recovery lifestyle apparel line. Check it out. Recover.
Proud, rare and proud.
And wear it loud and proud. Recover out loud, because I was loud about my addiction. Definitely going to be loud about my recovery. I recover out loud, so people out there no longer have to suffer or die in silence.
Thank you for all you do from the bottom of my heart. Really keep helping people. God bless you, Alex. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for listening to the Begin Again podcast. If today's story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you that healing is possible, I'd love for you to share it. Subscribe, leave a review, and help us spread the message that no one is too far gone to begin again. And if you're ready to wear your recovery with pride, visit us at recoverbrand.com. That's RCVR Brand.com. And until next time, take your power back.